The last screw tightened with a soft click, and I stepped back from the bed I had spent 3 days building for my boss. It was beautiful solid walnut, handcrafted joints, smooth edges, and strong enough to last for decades. I was reaching for my toolbox when she stopped me at the bedroom door. "Don't go yet," she said quietly. Then she looked at the bed, gave a nervous smile, and added, "We should test it." For a moment, I couldn't tell whether I had misunderstood her, or whether the woman who had never shown an ounce of emotion at work was finally letting me see something hidden behind her cold expression. If you believe kindness, hope, forgiveness, compassion, and second chances can change a person's life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. You never know whose heart might need a story like this today. My name is Caleb, and at 32, I had learned not to expect life to hand me anything easily. I lived in a small rented apartment outside Portland, Oregon, and worked as a furniture craftsman for a high-end design company. My father had taught me woodworking before he passed away, and every piece I built carried something of him inside it. My boss, Rebecca Whitmore, was a successful businesswoman in her early 40s. She was respected, intimidating, and famous around the office for being impossible to impress. She rarely smiled, never stayed for office celebrations, and seemed to keep an invisible wall between herself and everyone else. I had worked for her for nearly 2 years, and until that week, I had never been inside her home. Then she gave me an unusual assignment. She wanted a custom bed built for her new house in Seattle, Washington. It wasn't a luxury project for a client. It was for herself. She showed me a sketch she had drawn by hand, explaining that she wanted something simple, strong, and timeless. I noticed something strange about the design immediately. One side of the headboard had a small empty space, almost like a missing piece. When I asked about it, she simply said that it was intentional and changed the subject. For 3 days, I worked late in her private workshop. Rebecca came in occasionally, but she never talked about the bed. On the final evening, heavy rain began tapping against the windows while I carefully attached the last section of the headboard. I noticed an old photograph lying on a nearby table. It showed Rebecca standing beside a smiling man, who looked remarkably like her. Before I could ask, she walked into the room and quickly turned the photograph face down. The silence between us became uncomfortable. Finally, she told me the man was her younger brother, Jonathan. He had died several years earlier after a long illness. The house, she admitted, had been purchased years ago, but left mostly empty, because she couldn't bring herself to move into it. The bed wasn't really about furniture. It was about finally allowing herself to sleep in a room she had avoided for years. That was when I understood why she had seemed so cold. Sometimes people aren't heartless. Sometimes they are simply carrying a heartbreak they don't know how to put down. When she asked me not to leave, I followed her into the bedroom. She sat carefully on the edge of the bed while I pressed down on the mattress to check its support. The bed didn't move. I smiled and told her it had passed every test I could give it. She laughed softly and said that wasn't what she meant. Then she lay back for a moment, staring at the ceiling, and unexpectedly began to cry. She wasn't crying because of the bed. She was crying because for the first time in years, she had built something new without feeling guilty for leaving the past behind. I sat in the chair across the room, giving her space. She told me she had spent years believing that moving forward meant forgetting Jonathan. I told her my father had once taught me that remembering someone wasn't the same as refusing to live. Sometimes the best way to honor someone was to keep living the life they would have wanted for you. Rebecca looked at me for a long time. Then, she said something I would never forget. She told me that everyone at work saw her as a demanding boss, but I was the first person who had ever noticed that she was simply tired. The next morning, she surprised everyone at the company. Instead of criticizing the unfinished projects, she walked through the workshop thanking every employee personally. A month later, she created a small apprenticeship program in honor of her brother, giving young craftspeople a chance to learn woodworking without expensive tuition. And she changed my life too. She offered me a partnership in a new custom furniture division, trusting me to lead the craftsmanship team. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving from paycheck to paycheck. I was building something of my own. Months later, I visited Rebecca's house again. The bedroom door was open, and sunlight filled the room. The old photograph of Jonathan now stood beside the bed, no longer hidden in a drawer. Rebecca smiled and told me she had finally slept peacefully there. The bed had never really needed testing. What needed testing was whether two wounded people could trust life enough to begin again. And somehow, that night, they did. If this story touched something inside your heart, please support it with a like, share it with someone who believes people can change, and subscribe for more stories about kindness, healing, and second chances. And before you leave, tell me in the comments, have you ever met someone who seemed cold or distant, only to discover that they were quietly carrying a pain nobody could see? Your comment might remind someone else that they aren't alone. Because sometimes, the strongest thing a person can build isn't a piece of furniture. It's the courage to begin living again.